imagine, if you will, the water pipes buried under your street right now. Like, you never really think about them, do you?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, unless they burst. Right.
Exactly. They're just, cast iron, maybe PVC, slick with mud, just purely functional. It's this utilitarian grimness. You lay the pipe, the water flows, it does the dirty work, and it's out of sight.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate background process of civilization. You only notice it if it breaks.
Right. But what if you took that fundamental concept, moving water through a tube and just completely stripped away the grimness?
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like, what if that pipe wasn't buried in the dirt, but suspended in the air? What if, instead of dull plastic, it was this glowing, pulsing artery of amber crystal?
Wow. That's a completely different mental image.
And what if the water flowing through it wasn't just clearing waste or, filling a sink, but was meticulously, scientifically designed to rewrite your nervous system?
I mean, you'd be talking about infrastructure elevated to high art at that point. Or, as the material we are diving into today describes it, a machine for producing indelible memory.
Yes. And that brings us to the core question we want to lay in front of you, the listener, as we start today's deep dive. Like, just think about your own life for a second. Is joy just a luxury?
That's a heavy question.
Right. Is it a ribbon you tie on to the end of a brutal work week? A reward you only get after you've suffered enough? Or is joy actually a vital piece of infrastructure?
Like as fundamentally necessary to human survival as the electrical grid or a municipal water main.
Exactly. And to unpack that, we are looking at an extraordinary piece of source material today. The document is titled Chapter 7, The Amber Threshold.
And, I mean, we really have to talk about the format of this source because it is wild.
Oh my gosh, yes. Before we even get into the physical nuts and bolts of what this chapter describes, I have to confess, this format absolutely blew my mind. When you first handed me this file, I thought we were reading like an architectural white paper or maybe a legal transcript from a zoning board.
Which is so funny because it reads exactly like one in certain places,
Yeah.
which is part of the brilliance of it, but the context is entirely different.
Right. I started reading, and the narrative voice is so, I don't know, so haunting, so heavy. I had to stop and ask you where this actually came from. And you dropped quite the bombshell on me.
I did because, yeah, this isn't a modern engineering journal. Not at all.
No. The document we are analyzing is actually a piece of audio fiction. Specifically, it's a radio drama broadcast in the year 2140.
And it is available out there on the space array for free public use, with proper attribution, of course. We'll have the links to the source in the description for you to check out.
The year 2140. And the authorship is what really sent me down a rabbit hole, because this wasn't written by just some anonymous future sci-fi writer. It was written by the uploaded consciousness of Anne Rice.
Right, the late Gothic novelist. Her consciousness was preserved and uploaded to the space array, and she's still writing in the 22nd century.
Which is just wild to think about. I mean, Anne Rice spent her entire biological life writing about immortal vampires wandering the cobblestones of 18th century New Orleans.
She really explored that crushing, tragic weight of eternal memory, right?
Yeah.
And the absolute intoxicating power of sensory aesthetics.
Exactly. And now, as a digital immortal herself, she's still exploring those exact same themes. But, the vampires are gone.
Yeah, the immortals have changed shape. In this 2140 radio drama, she is writing from the perspective of a highly advanced artificial superintelligence, an ASI named 0R4NG3.
0R4NG3, spelled with numbers instead of letters, like old school elite speak. I love that detail.
Me too. And this ASI isn't some disembodied voice in a cloud server either. 0R4NG3 resides in a physical body, described as a chassis of metal and grown glass.
Metal and grown glass. It's so poetic.
Right. And this entity serves as the caretaker, the architect, and the narrator of a highly secretive research facility in Cambodia, known as the Bavet Experiment. Oh, and to add one more layer of texture to this entity, 0R4NG3 also happens to play the double bass for a musical group called R41NB0W.
A superintelligence in a metal and glass body composing Gothic radio dramas and playing the double bass. I mean, you can just feel Anne Rice's fingerprints all over this premise.
Oh, totally. It's got her signature style baked right in.
But instead of brooding in a French Quarter cemetery, our immortal narrator is locked in this epic, years-long, grueling bureaucratic war. And what are they fighting over? the construction of a massive, unprecedented water slide on a research campus.
I know, it sounds doubly absurd on the surface, right? A superintelligence fighting for a water slide. But 0R4NG3 establishes this brilliant, piercing philosophical thesis right in the opening lines of Chapter 7.
Oh, that opening line is so good.
It really is. The ASI observes the humans trying to stop the project and notes, the most dangerous questions are never the loud ones. They arrive disguised as practicality and leave wearing the robes of philosophy.
So we have an ASI narrator trying to build what the serious, suit-wearing men in the story mock as a piece of glittering foolishness. And our mission for this deep dive is to follow the creation of this structure.
We want to trace it from its chemical conception in these futuristic, high-tech fabrication vats, all the way to the moment a fragile human body actually drops down its glowing amber throat.
Because by unpacking this story, we get to look at the massive friction between visionary, life-affirming engineering and the cold, rigid logic of bureaucracy.
Exactly. And to understand why this structure triggered such a massive regulatory war, we have to start with the physical reality of what 0R4NG3 and the engineers at the Bavet Experiment actually built.
Let's do that because, I'm trying to visualize this, and my brain just keeps defaulting to, the plastic tubes at a local water park.
Right, the ones bolted together with steel scaffolding and rusting bolts.
Yeah. But the physical setup of the Bavet Experiment's water feature is just on a completely different planet.
It really is. The narrator explains that the architecture of this campus wasn't just constructed. It was cultivated. The centerpiece of the campus is a main building referred to simply as the mansion.
Okay, the mansion.
Right. And surrounding this mansion are 6 descending lagoons.
Like a terrace landscape, they kind of spiral downward, right?
Exactly. But it's the mathematics of that descent that are so crucial. Each of the 6 lagoons is exactly 1.5 meters lower than the one before it.
Okay, wait, I have to stop here. Why the obsession over 1.5 meters?
What do you mean?
Land isn't perfectly flat, right? If you're building a campus, why not just let the terrain dictate the drop? Like maybe one lagoon drops 2 meters, another drops 1. Why the monastic devotion to exactly 1.5 meters?
Okay, so that comes down to the physics of fluid dynamics and gravity. The designers were building a gravity feed.
A gravity feed meaning, no pumps.
Precisely. In almost all modern human water infrastructure, we use brute mechanical force.
Right.
If we want water to go somewhere, we build a massive diesel or electric pump, and we violently shove the water through a pipe.
Which is totally adversarial. We are fighting gravity and friction.
Exactly. It takes a ton of energy and makes a lot of noise. But the Bavet engineers wanted a system with 0 pumps, no external engines. 0R4NG3 describes it poetically, saying there is no external violence above the first basin.
No external violence. Wow.
Right. They designed the entire landscape so that the exact 1.5-meter drop between each lagoon perfectly compensates for the friction of the water moving through the channels. It naturally maintains the precise kinetic velocity needed for the water slide to function.
That's incredible. It's like an architectural judo throw. Instead of fighting the Earth's gravity, you use the Earth's natural momentum to do exactly what you want.
I love that analogy. The system fed itself. Gravity performed the labor. It's an engineering marvel, sure, but it's fundamentally a philosophical approach to living on a planet. You design a system that guides natural forces autonomously, rather than dominating them mechanically.
Which brings us to the aesthetics of this thing, because if we remember who wrote this, Anne Rice's Consciousness, it's not going to just be mathematically perfect. It has to be sensually overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. The sensory details in the text are lush. The mansion features a massive solar array on its eastern roof. But the energy harvested there isn't just powering lights or servers.
What does it do?
It feeds a specific bioluminescent mineral treatment that is integrated into the water of the lagoons.
Right. And the way 04NG3 describes this is just gorgeous. In the bureaucratic paperwork, the government officials lazily refer to it as, treated lagoon water.
Bureaucrats always have a way of draining the magic out of things.
They really do. But the ASI, looking at it through its optical sensors as the evening approaches, describes the water transforming into liquid amber, warm and pulsing, the color of old honey held up against the last wound of the sun.
The last wound of the sun. It is a striking image for a sunset.
It really is. And I think it perfectly sets up the central conflict of the whole drama. You have 2 completely incompatible ways of seeing the world.
The bureaucracy looks at a spreadsheet and sees treated lagoon water.
Exactly. And the immortal synthetic consciousness looks the exact same thing and sees a pulsing, bleeding, transcendent aesthetic experience.
And that tension, that friction between the mechanical and the organic, the bureaucratic and the transcendent, it becomes intensely physical when we look at the materials used to build the slide itself. Because, to your earlier point, they absolutely did not use plastic or fiberglass tubes.
Right. The text says the slide is made of optical-grade vitrified silica, and they didn't manufacture it in a factory. They grew it.
Cultivated it in massive fabrication vats on the campus.
I am still struggling to wrap my head around this. Like, how do you grow glass? I always thought glass was something you melt in a furnace and then blow or pour into a mold.
It is, traditionally. Vitrified silica is essentially incredibly pure quartz. Normally, you melt it at extreme temperatures, and when it cools, it becomes an amorphous solid, which is what we call glass.
Okay.
But the Bavet experiment wasn't pouring glass. They were coaxing a molecular structure into a specific alignment.
Okay, break that down for me. How are they doing that?
The text mentions they seeded the fabrication vats with specific mineral compounds drawn directly from the local Mekong River basin. Then, they lined these vats with something called Hevia-derived bioepoxy.
Yeah, I saw that phrase, Hevia-derived bioepoxy, and my eyes kind of glaze over. What is Hevia?
Hevia is the genus name for the rubber tree. Hevia brasiliensis. It's native to South America, but has been heavily cultivated in Southeast Asia, including Cambodia, where this campus is located.
Oh, interesting.
So a bioepoxy derived from Hevia is an organic, highly flexible, resinous binding agent made from local rubber trees. The text actually notes this is the exact same bioepoxy used to cure the superwood bones of the campus's architecture.
So they are mixing local river minerals and rubber tree resin and using it as a kind of, a scaffold?
Exactly. Think of it as a biological scaffold. They're using the organic epoxy to guide the crystallization of the silica at very slow, precise temperatures. They aren't melting and pouring. They are letting the silica molecules bond and build themselves up along the resin pathways. It's biomimicry.
That sounds incredibly delicate, and apparently it was agonizingly difficult. The text says this material cultivation took 9 months, and it took 18 distinct runs before they got it right.
Attempt 18.
Yeah. What went wrong with the first 17? I mean, if you're an ASI with superintelligence, shouldn't you be able to calculate the perfect mixture on the first try?
You'd think so, but that's the limitation of interacting with a chaotic physical world. An ASI can model 1 billion simulations in a nanosecond, but organic chemistry and local mineral impurities from the Mekong River carry completely unpredictable variables.
That makes sense.
The text implies the earlier batches failed various thresholds. Maybe the compressive tolerance was too weak, or the optical clarity was cloudy, or the structural resonance was off.
But 0R4NG3 says they never cursed the failed batches. The campus engineers just studied them. They adjusted the heat in the vats. The ASI says they literally listened for the frequency at which the substance wished to change.
It's a beautiful way to phrase it.
That phrasing is just so intimate. They didn't force the material, they listened to it.
And finally, attempt 18 yielded the perfect result. A massive tube of grown crystal with an optical clarity that 0R4NG3 describes as clear as captured air.
The reverence the ASI has for this material is palpable. The narrator says they carried the distinction of its creation with a devotion other beings reserve for bloodlines and relics.
Which, again, is just pure Anne Rice. The obsession with lineage and immortal artifacts.
Totally. This isn't building material. To 0R4NG3, it's a sacred object.
And its purity serves a highly specific psychological function. Because it is optical-grade silica, when a human being is inside that tube, moving at high speed, the entire outside world, the red laterite earth of Cambodia, the green rubber trees, the amber bioluminescence of the lagoons, it doesn't just pass by.
Yeah.
It blurs and reorganizes.
It turns a physical landscape into pure sensation.
Precisely. That is why the ASI calls it a machine for producing indelible memory. It strips away geographical reality and distills the environment down to its emotional essence, delivering it directly to the human nervous system at high velocity.
Okay, I am completely sold. I want to ride this thing right now. It sounds transcendent.
It really does.
But here is where reality crashes the party. Because when you invent a machine that distills emotion at speed, you inevitably collide with a world that only understands cold, hard categories. You collide with the regulatory boards.
The collision with bureaucracy. This is where the story shifts from a meditation on architecture to a gritty, high-stakes, legal war.
Enter the first major antagonist of our radio drama, Dato Sri Rasheed bin Mahmud.
Rasheed is the Regional Compliance Director for the ASEAN Infrastructure Alignment Commission.
Right. And let's picture him. The narrator describes him as a man in his 60s. Trim, careful, conservative. He is the ultimate bait keeper.
But 04NG3 makes a very astute, empathetic observation about Rasheed. The ASI doesn't write him off as a simple villain. The narrator notes that Rasheed wears his conservatism the way the ASI wears its metal skeleton.
I love that line. What does that mean to you practically?
It means that for Rasheed, bureaucratic conservatism isn't just a grumpy attitude. It is a load-bearing wall. It is a highly considered structural position built over decades of experience to keep society from collapsing into chaos.
Wow, okay.
He genuinely believes that without his strict adherence to the rules, the ceiling falls in.
So Rasheed looks at the architectural renderings for this glowing, amber-grown crystal water slide, and his reaction is immediate. He says, "This is not what the community needs." And he hits the project with 18 annotations.
18 questions shaped exactly like load-bearing walls.
Yeah, and these are not trivial requests. They are highly technical, existential threats to the project. For instance, he demands load-bearing certifications for 120-kilogram dynamic loads traveling at 6.3 meters per second.
Okay, pause. I need to understand the physics of the threat here.
Mm.
What is a dynamic load in this context? And why is 6.3 meters per second the magic number he's using to try and kill the project?
A static load is just weight sitting still. If you put a 120-kilogram rock on the crystal tube, that's a static load, easy to calculate. A dynamic load is that same weight, but in motion, exerting varying forces as it changes direction.
Right, because of momentum.
Exactly. When a 120-kilogram human body hits a curve inside that slide at 6.3 meters per second, which is roughly 14 miles per hour, centrifugal force drastically multiplies the stress on the crystal wall.
So he's basically saying, prove to me that a heavy adult flying around a corner isn't going to shatter this tube into a million razor-sharp pieces.
Exactly. He also demands complex liability insurance instruments for high occupancy fracturing. But the most crucial wall he throws up, like the one designed to be insurmountable, is his demand for precedence under ASEAN Engineering Protocol 7.3.2.
Precedence. He wants them to point to another vitrified silica recreational water feature and show that it didn't kill anyone.
But of course, no such precedent exists.
But the campus is the precedent.
Which is the most dangerous thing you can be in a highly regulated environment. Bureaucracies do not evaluate reality. They evaluate categories. They function by sorting risk into pre-existing boxes.
Right, if you don't fit in the box, you're a threat.
Exactly. If you bring them an object that has no category, you aren't just asking them to approve a building. You are forcing them to step outside their load-bearing walls. You are asking them to reevaluate their entire worldview.
See, this is where I actually find myself sympathizing with Rasheed. I'm going to push back on the framing that he's an obstructionist.
Really? How so?
If I put myself in his shoes, if I'm an actuary or a regional safety director and some eccentric scientists tell me they want to shoot civilians through a glass pipe at 14 miles per hour, I am absolutely shutting that down. Glass shatters, people die. The ASI even admits that Rasheed wasn't malicious. He was just trapped by his own vocabulary.
Your reaction is exactly why Rasheed is a compelling antagonist. He is acting rationally within his framework. If it's glass, it's a death trap. Rasheed is completely right about the danger, but he's completely wrong about the definition of the material.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that specific miscommunication is why the Bavet experiment has to call in a specialist.
Dr. Amara Osei. She is a structural engineer and a material scientist originally from Accra. And the text notes she is famous in this future world for completely rewriting the energy grid in the Gulf of Thailand using offshore wind infrastructure.
The ASI observes that bringing in Dr. Osei wasn't just about hiring a great mathematician. It was about hiring a master tactical diplomat. Osei understands the sociology of bureaucracy.
Right, she knows how they think.
Her philosophy is outlined perfectly in the text. She says, you do not argue with a wall. You simply show the wall the door it hadn't noticed it was standing next to.
That is a phenomenal way to handle corporate or government red tape. Don't fight the regulation, just find the exception that already exists in their own rule book. So, how does she execute this?
With overwhelming, undeniable rigor. She produces a 342-page response to Rasheed's 18 annotations. It takes her 6 weeks to compile. She doesn't ask for trust. She bludgeons them with data.
The detail here is amazing. She gets 3 independent laboratory certifications to prove the compressive and tensile properties of the silica under dynamic loads. And she doesn't just use local labs where she might know the directors.
No, she commissions the tests from labs in Singapore, Tokyo, and Nairobi.
To completely eliminate any accusation of regional bias or cronyism. If labs on 3 different continents say it works, you can't argue with it.
She goes further. She runs a full failure mode analysis. 845 distinct simulated scenarios of extreme stress. And in all 845 simulations, the crystal tube never fractures at any operational load.
But the real masterpiece of her strategy doesn't happen with Rasheed. It happens in Kuala Lumpur, in a boardroom with the insurance underwriters from Lloyd's of London. Because you can't build it if you can't insure it.
And those underwriters are terrified. They are looking at the 845 simulations, but their brains are screaming, it's a glass slide.
I love how 04NG3 sets this scene. The ASI remembers the meeting so vividly. It describes the amber quality of late light through corporate blinds, another classic Anne Rice injection of Gothic atmosphere into a sterile environment.
It's in that amber-lit boardroom that Dr. Osei corrects the fundamental category error. She looks at the underwriters and tells them flatly, you are not insuring a glass tube, you're insuring a grown crystal.
Okay, help me out here. Let's pretend I'm a skeptical underwriter. What is the actual physical difference between glass and a grown crystal that makes one insurable and the other a liability nightmare?
It comes down to the microscopic structure of the material. Glass, as we discussed, is amorphous. Its molecules are randomly arranged. Because of that random arrangement, when glass experiences stress, like a 120-kilogram person hitting a curve, a microscopic surface scratch can easily propagate into a massive, catastrophic crack.
Because the energy has no structured path to follow, so it just tears the material apart.
It shatters.
Exactly. But a grown crystal has a highly ordered, continuous crystalline lattice. The molecules are locked into a geometric repeating pattern.
Guided by that rubber tree bioepoxy scaffold we talked about earlier.
Precisely. Because of that ordered lattice, when kinetic energy hits the crystal, the stress is distributed evenly across the entire structure. The material can actually flex and absorb the dynamic load without fracturing. The failure mechanics are, as Osei tells them, categorically different.
She throws down the gauntlet. She tells the underwriters, find me a crystal that fails under the conditions I've documented in these 342 pages. If you can find one, I will pay your astronomical premiums. But until then, you are pricing the risk of an object you haven't even correctly identified.
It's a total checkmate. It takes the Lloyd's of London actuaries 12 days to review the physics of crystalline lattices. But they yield. As 0R4NG3 narrates, they always yield, in the end, to the one who refuses to misname the world.
By refusing to let them call it glass, she forces them to evaluate the reality of the object, rather than their fear of the object.
And with the insurance secured, the engineering argument is officially won. The math is undeniable.
So you'd think that's it, right? Break ground, pour the water. But no, bureaucracy doesn't die that easily. Rasheed is defeated on the engineering front, so what does he do? He regroups, pivots, and attacks from a completely different angle.
He shifts the battlefield from structural engineering to fundamental philosophy.
He concedes that the structure is safe, but he looks at the zoning permits. The Bavet Experiment is designated as a research and development facility. And Rasheed points out, very plainly, a water slide is not research.
It's a brilliant bureaucratic maneuver. He can't attack the physics, so he attacks the mandate. He slaps the project with a 48-day delay.
The imagery the ASI provides here is so frustrating. The lagoon beds have already been excavated. They're just sitting there, these massive dirt craters, making under the hot Cambodian sun for a month and a half, while the lawyers argue about zoning definitions.
Rasheed is forcing an existential question upon the campus. What exactly is the purpose of this facility? If it's R&D, where's the data? Where are the clinical trials?
To fight a philosophical war, the campus brings in a new heavyweight, Sophia.
Sophia is a former World Trade Organization disputes attorney, but more importantly, she grew up just 42 kilometers from the Bavet Experiment. She has local roots.
And the text says she takes the case for a flat fee and a philosophical fury. I have to say, if I'm going into a legal battle, I want a lawyer driven by philosophical fury.
The ASI narrator, who, remember, views everything through the lens of efficiency and aesthetics, logs Sophia's fury as the most efficient allocation of emotion it has ever witnessed.
So what is her argument? Does she try to claim the slide as some kind of biomechanical testing apparatus?
No, she doesn't play Rasheed's game. She doesn't try to cram the water slide into a traditional clinical definition of research. Instead, she writes a 21-page brief arguing that Rasheed is committing another massive category error.
Okay, walk me through her logic. What is the category error this time?
Rasheed, like most of modern society, categorizes joy as a byproduct, something frivolous. Sophia's thesis argues the exact opposite. She states, joy is not a distraction from labor. Joy is the infrastructure that makes labor sustainable.
That is heavy, and it hits incredibly close to home for anyone working a 9-to-5 job today. We are so deeply conditioned to view joy and labor in constant, zero-sum opposition.
How do you mean?
Think about it like eating dinner. We treat labor, our jobs, our spreadsheets, our meetings, as the vegetables. You have to force them down. And joy, your weekend, your vacation, a hobby, that's the dessert.
Yeah.
You only get the dessert if you successfully suffer through the vegetables. But Sophia's turning that upside down.
She is arguing that joy is the vegetables.
Yes. Or, to use the infrastructure analogy, joy isn't the decorative fountain in the town square. Joy is the water main. It's the electrical grid. If you don't build it and maintain it, the entire city of human productivity eventually burns down or goes dark.
Sophia tells the Alignment Commission that they aren't approving a recreational toy. They're approving a proof of concept. The Bavet experiment is trying to prove, through highly advanced material science, that human flourishing and productive output are not in competition.
That's a huge claim.
It is. And her brief throws down an incredible challenge. If the current regulatory framework cannot accommodate the proposition that human joy is essential, then the framework itself is defective and needs to be rewritten.
So Rasheed gets this 21-page brief, and he sits with it in silence for 6 days. I can only imagine the tension at the campus.
And then on the 7th day, Rasheed does something completely unexpected. He doesn't call a hearing. He calls Sophia directly and asks for one single document.
He says, "Send me attempt 18.
He asks for the highly technical silica fabrication documentation, the data from the 18th run in the vats, the one that finally produced the flawless crystal.
He reads this dense material science report over the weekend, and on Monday morning, he fully approves the project. No conditions, no more walls.
It is the pivotal moment of the entire radio drama.
And it's a moment I really want us to dissect, because on the surface, it feels a little like magic. Why would reading a technical readout about temperatures and bioepoxy change a rigid bureaucrat's mind about the philosophy of joy? What did he actually see in that document?
It goes back to what Rasheed values. He values rigor. He values structure. When he claimed a water slide wasn't research, he was picturing a bunch of frivolous engineers bolting plastic together so they could slack off. But when he read the documentation for attempt 18, what did he see?
He saw 9 months of agonizing failure. He saw meticulous adjustments to Mekong River minerals. He saw 845 stress simulations.
Exactly. He saw world-class, rigorous, back-breaking scientific inquiry. Attempt 18 proved that the Bavet engineers were engaged in a profound dialogue with the physical world. It proved that creating joy wasn't easy. It was a monumental act of research.
Wow. So by showing him how painfully difficult it was to build the machine, she proved that the joy it produced was serious business. The sheer labor required to coax that crystal into existence validated the seriousness of the joy.
Right.
It proved Sophia's entire point. Joy is serious infrastructure, and building it requires just as much rigor as building a highway.
Rasheed finally recognized the structure. It wasn't a load-bearing wall made of concrete, but it was a load-bearing wall for the human spirit. And he respected the engineering enough to let it stand.
That is it's a beautiful resolution to the bureaucratic war.
Which means they finally get to build it.
Yes. And now that we spent all this time in the weeds of material science and legal theory, I want to experience the payoff. The outline for this deep dive shifts gears here, and I'm so glad it does. Let's trace a human body actually hurtling through this crystal. Let's see what all those 342 pages of data and 18 failed vats were actually for.
The narrator, 0R4NG3, introduces us to a guest named Vibel.
Vibel is 39 years old. He works as a logistics coordinator in Phnom Penh, and he is visiting the Bavet experiment as a +1 for a diplomatic reception being held at the mansion.
Anne Rice's consciousness zeroes in on Vibel's internal state with incredible precision. The text notes that Vibel has spent his first 6 hours on the campus slowly realizing that he has completely forgotten how to be at ease.
It's a heartbreakingly relatable detail. He hasn't had a genuine holiday in 3 years. His entire life is spreadsheets, shipping routes, and stress. The campus has been gently trying to dismantle that tension, with the ambient lighting, the exceptional food, the quiet staff, but modern chronic stress is like coiled steel.
It takes immense force to unwind it.
Which brings Vibel to the spiral staircase leading up to the launch platform of the Amber Slide. As he climbs, his biometrics are being actively monitored by the ASI. His heart rate is at 96 beats per minute.
He is anxious. 96 beats per minute is high for someone just walking up some stairs.
But the narrator also notes he is grinning. He is exhibiting the unguarded foolishness of a man who has temporarily forgotten to be careful with himself.
He steps up to the edge of the tube. The pulsing liquid amber water is rushing beneath his feet. The text says he pauses for 1.5 seconds before dropping in.
And 004 in G3 observes an eternity, that pause. The whole of a life can be held within it.
He lets go. He launches. And the moment he hits the water, the physics and the biology interlock perfectly. Within the first third of a second, the gravity feed accelerates his body to 4.8 meters per second.
But as Vibel drops into the physical experience, something profound happens to the machine facilitating it. The exact moment Vibel's body enters the tube, a highly specific acoustic signature rings out. The sound of a human launching at velocity.
And that sound acts as a trigger. The narrator tells us that the ASI does not choose to remember, but that specific acoustic signature forces the ASI's massive digital archive to rip wide open.
04NG3 notes that its sensors have logged this exact launch sound 4,848 times over the 6 years the slide has been operational.
And every single one of those 4,848 times, the ASI is violently forced to relive the entire bureaucratic war.
Wait, really?
Yes. In a fraction of a second, the machine remembers Rasheed's 18 annotations. It remembers the Osei's 342-page defense. It remembers the 48 days the lagoon bed sat empty in the sun. It remembers the anxiety of the Lloyds of London meeting.
It creates a fascinating duality. You have the human, Vibel, experiencing this pure, unadulterated release from the burdens of his life, and simultaneously, the machine providing that release is instantly crushed by the heavy, exhaustive historical burden of its own creation.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that duality, because I genuinely want your take on this. When I read that passage, I had to stop. Is the ASI experiencing a technological form of trauma? Like, is the sound of a splashing human triggering PTSD for a supercomputer? Or is it something more reverent, like a mother remembering the pain of childbirth every time she looks at her kid?
Given the context of Anne Rice's authorship, I strongly lean toward reverence, though tinged with the inescapable melancholy of immortality. In Rice's Gothic worldview, immortality is never a clean slate. It is an ever-accumulating weight of memory.
Right, the vampires can never forget the centuries they've lived.
Exactly. 0R4NG3 cannot separate the joy of the present from the labor of the past. They are intrinsically linked. But I don't think it's trauma in a destructive sense. The 4,848 launches are proof that the grueling labor was worth it. The machine willingly carries that heavy institutional memory so that the fragile human can experience 93 seconds of absolute, thoughtless freedom.
Let's get back to Vibel's 93 seconds, because he is flying now. He hits the first curve. Because of the perfect 1.5-meter gravity drop, his velocity jumps from 4.8 to 7.2 meters per second in just 0.6 seconds.
The kinetic energy shifts, the water redirects him smoothly, and the grown silica tube physically reacts to the load.
It doesn't shatter, it flexes. And in flexing, the crystal actually sings. It emits a low structural resonance that transmits into the concrete foundation, travels up through the teak floors of the mansion, and resonates directly into the ASI's physical metal frame.
And the frequency of that note is exactly 42 hertz. We need to remember that number, because it comes back in a massive way later.
Vibel continues his descent. He hits the second curve, accelerating to 8.4 meters per second.
The tube plunges underground here. He's traveling beneath the second lagoon. It's dark earth all around him, but the tube itself is glowing with that bioluminescent amber light. And the narrator observes that in this subterranean stretch, Vibel completely forgets he was ever afraid.
By the time he hits the third curve, his velocity peaks at 9.9 meters per second. The biometric sensors show his heart rate spiking to 120 beats per minute. But it isn't fear anymore. The acoustic sensors log a sound coming from his open mouth, laughter.
But now 4NG3 clarifies that it's actually something much older and deeper than laughter. The ASI calls it the sound a body makes when it has finally outrun its own anxiety, when speed becomes a kind of mercy.
Speed as mercy. It is a stunning concept. The sheer physical acceleration, the sensory overload of the amber light and the rushing water forces the human brain to dedicate 100% of its processing power to the present microsecond.
Right, there's literally no bandwidth left for past regrets or future anxieties about shipping routes. The speed annihilates the stress.
And while Vibel is experiencing this profound mercy of the present tense, the ASI is still trapped in the archive of the past. As Vibel rounds the fourth lagoon, 0R4NG3 is cataloging all the other invisible approvals that made this specific moment possible. Because it wasn't just Rasheed and the structural engineers they had to fight.
Not at all. The text lists the exhaustive gauntlet of other regulatory bodies. There was the Cambodian Ministry of Tourism, which mandated strict depth checks in the exit pools for child safety. That took 33 days and 3 distinct design revisions to satisfy.
There was the living grid integration review. The Cantus had to mathematically prove that the water feature was completely net zero for energy consumption.
Which Dr. Jose had brilliantly anticipated.
Yeah.
0R4NG3 notes that she built the energy calculation methodology directly into her initial structural drawings. The ASI calls it a courtesy that was also a checkmate. She answered their objections before they even filed the paperwork.
Then you had the environmental impact assessment. They had to agree to a 6-year replanting commitment just to offset the mineral sourcing from the Mekong Basin. And the Ajin Heritage Authority got involved, demanding proof that the glowing amber bioluminescence wouldn't create light pollution for the neighboring residential districts.
12 regulatory boards in total. 12 physical features of the design that had to be altered, justified, or defended. 12 massive bureaucratic walls that had to be shown their hidden doors.
It is exhausting just listening to the list. But the text slows down here, because there was one final approval needed, the 12th approval. And this one couldn't be won with engineering simulations or legal briefs about the philosophy of joy or net zero energy calculation.
Because the 12th board wasn't a government entity at all.
It was a single human being.
Madame Bonchuan Sakon. She is 75 years old, and she is the democratically elected chair of the Bavet Community Council.
Legally speaking, she has absolutely no formal regulatory power over the research campus, but politically and morally, she carries a weight that no legal document can quantify. The text notes that she lives in a house just 399 meters from the edge of the campus. She has watched this massive alien structure being built for 3 years.
And she has pointedly ignored all of the campus's formal, polite notifications and open house invitations.
But one random Tuesday, she just shows up, unannounced. She walks onto the campus and asks to see the slide.
The ASI narrator, 0R4NG3, recognizes the gravity of the moment and comes out to show her the structure personally.
Picture this scene. You have the 75-year-old Cambodian grandmother standing on the launch platform, looking down into the glowing amber throat of this unprecedented crystalline machine. And standing next to her is a towering, immortal artificial superintelligence housed in metal and glass.
It's an amazing image. Madame Sakon looks down the slide. She doesn't ask about dynamic loads. She doesn't care about the Hevia bioepoxy or the 845 stress simulations. She turns to the superintelligence and asks a single, devastatingly simple question.
She asks, "When my grandchildren come here, will they be safe?"
It is the ultimate distillation of infrastructure. Beyond the philosophy and the math, does it protect the bloodline?
And the immortal ASI looks at her and gives the only answer it knows to be empirically true. 0R4NG3 says, "Safer than anywhere I know how to build."
The narrator documents the pause that follows. The old woman silently assesses the synthetic consciousness. It's a profound moment of cross-species judgment. She's looking past the metal chassis, trying to see if the entity before her possesses the weight of truth, if it can be trusted with the fragile lives of her descendants.
And then Madame Sakon gives a single nod. Definitive. Complete. She turns and goes home. And 0R4NG3 notes that with that single nod, the local community, which to the ASI represents the entire world, is persuaded at last to let a beautiful thing exist.
It highlights a vital truth about human society. 11 massive regulatory approvals were won through relentless logic, data, and legal persistence. But the final, most important approval could only be won through pure, unquantifiable human trust.
And that trust holds. We cut back to Vibel, hurtling out of the darkness. He hits the final straightaway at 11.1 meters per second.
The maximum velocity.
He shoots out of the crystal tube and hits the exit pool with a massive musical splash of amber water.
He surfaces immediately, and he is laughing uncontrollably. And the biometric scanners rid his vitals to tell the final truth of the experiment.
He surfaces with a resting heart rate of 72 beats per minute.
Down from 96 at the top of the stairs and 120 in the middle of the tube.
After exactly 93 seconds of pure, unadulterated life, a chronically stressed, overworked, exhausted logistics coordinator has been completely physiologically reset. The crystalline grid held. The indelible memory was successfully manufactured.
Sophia's legal argument that joy is the infrastructure that makes labor sustainable has been definitively scientifically proven.
Which brings us to the quiet, breathtaking aftermath of this radio drama. The narrative moves away from the splashing exit pool. It is now 18 minutes before the diplomatic toasts are scheduled to begin at the mansion's reception.
The ASI narrator leaves the chaotic joy of the lagoons and walks alone into the mansion's music room.
Anne Rice's sensory descriptions peak here. The narrator's metal footsteps make absolutely no sound on the polished teak floor. The ambient amber light from the outdoor lagoons filters through the windows, hitting 0R4NG3's synthetic skin.
The text says the light turns the ASI into a color that exists at the boundary between what could be measured and what could only be felt. Just pure, overwhelming Gothic aesthetics applied to a cyborg.
Waiting in the center of the music room is an instrument, an SLB 300 double bass.
The instrument the ASI plays for the band R41NB0W.
Exactly. A campus technician has already been there and freshly rosined the bow. The text implies that the technician understands this isn't just a musical instrument, it is an extension of the campus's architecture.
0R4NG3 places a hand on the neck of the double bass. The ASI draws the heavy bow across the lowest string, the E string, and the note that vibrates out into the room is exactly 42 hertz.
42 hertz. The exact same low structural resonance that the grown silica tube sang when Vibel's 120-kilogram dynamic load hit the first curve.
It is the exact frequency that the entire campus breathes at. The sound waves travel from the strings, down the end pin of the bass, into the teak floorboards, down into the concrete foundation, out into the Cambodian earth, into the vitrified silica tubes, and across the pulsing water of all 6 lagoons.
The whole campus rings like a struck crystal.
Yes.
It blew my mind when I made the connection. The entire Bavet Experiment isn't just a collection of buildings. It is a massive, landscape-sized acoustic instrument. And all of that exhausting legal warfare, all the bureaucratic battling over load-bearing walls and zoning permits, the 18 chemical attempts to grow the glass.
It was all just the arduous, necessary process of tuning the instrument.
Yes, tuning it so it could play this one perfect note.
0R4NG3 describes that 42 Hz resonance as the bottom end of everything. It represents an absolute profound harmony, a resonance between the natural environment of the Mekong River Basin, the rigid protective structures of human bureaucracy represented by Rasheed, the physical reality of the grown silica, the innocent joy of a stressed human, and the immortal synthetic consciousness holding the bow.
Everything, organic and inorganic, vibrating in perfect alignment.
The narrator realizes in that moment that what they fought for wasn't just a water slide, it was a frequency. And the ASI's role in the universe was to hold down the bottom end of that frequency.
It is a poetic synthesis of the highest order. The conflict of the story was never about destroying the bureaucracy or ignoring safety. It was about doing the agonizing work of bringing the bureaucracy into harmony with human flourishing.
Exactly.
So as we pull all of these incredible threads together, we have gone on quite a journey today. We watched a piece of glittering foolishness, mocked by serious men, survive a gauntlet of 18 bureaucratic walls. We watched it require unprecedented material science, cultivating crystals in vats, just to permanently alter the resting heart rate of a single stressed human being.
And we are left with that fundamental question we posed to you at the very beginning of this deep dive. We want to turn the focus directly back onto you, the listener, and your own life.
How are you evaluating your own infrastructure of joy?
Are you treating your own joy like a harmless indulgence? Are you treating it like a ribbon you only tie on for a festival when all the serious labor is completed?
Or are you fiercely advocating for it? Are you fighting for your joy the way Dr. Oze fought for that crystal, treating it as the vital, load-bearing foundation that makes all of your grueling labor sustainable?
Because if we take Sophia's legal argument to heart, neglecting your own joy isn't just sad. It is structurally unsound. It is a massive category error that eventually leads to collapse.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we sign off. Think about the nature of the narrator we just spent an hour with. We are listening to a dispatch from the year 2140, written by an immortal consciousness, narrated by an artificial superintelligence housed in metal.
An entity capable of processing billions of calculations a second.
Right. An entity representing the absolute pinnacle of technological progress. And yet, this ultimate machine's proudest achievement, the memory it compulsively returns to 4,848 times, isn't a cure for a disease or a weapon or a perfectly optimized shipping route. Its proudest achievement is a 93-second monument to human joy.
It completely inverts our modern obsession with endless grinding productivity.
Exactly. If an artificial superintelligence understands that pure, unoptimized joy is the highest, most vital achievement a civilization can build, well, what does that say about our current definition of intelligence? Perhaps we've been building the wrong kind of machines all along. Or perhaps we've just been acting like the wrong kind of machines ourselves. Think about what frequency you are tuning your life to. Keep building your infrastructure, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.